The Beltway press is applauding news of a deal between Senators Chuck Schumer and Joe Manchin to advance climate change legislation. It's being called the Inflation Reduction Act, and it lays out about $400 billion in new spending, a number that is by orders of magnitude smaller than the first iterations of climate change legislation offered last year by progressive Democrats and the president. Remember, we've gone from a $6 trillion proposal offered by Senator Bernie Sanders down to a $3.5 trillion compromise put forward by the president, down to a $1.5 trillion deal to get moderates like Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema on board, to now a $433 billion package. Manchin has succeeded so much in lowering expectations for what Democrats can accomplish that a shit sandwich like this is being treated as an historic victory. Well, let's look at what's actually in it. First, the bill would raise $739 billion in revenue. That's done through a couple of pretty good provisions, including prescription drug pricing reform, which will save the government hundreds of billions of dollars by allowing it to negotiate medication prices. The bill also imposes a 15% minimum tax on major corporations to put an end to big businesses paying often 0% in taxes. The bill would invest in IRS enforcement to go after wealthy tax cheats, which over the long term is estimated to raise over $100 billion in extra revenue. And it would tighten the carried interest loophole, which allows some of the wealthiest people in the country to pay reduced taxes on their investment income. This is a good proposal, though there's a chance it doesn't survive future negotiations, especially when Senator Kirsten Sinema, who has long opposed closing the loophole, sinks her nails into it. Not touched by Manchin's deal is the Trump tax cuts. High-income earners will still enjoy historically low tax rates. That drastically reduces the amount of revenue that can be raised and put toward actually fighting climate change. Now, those are just the pay-fors in the bill. Here's what exactly they are paying for. Two things mainly. One, extending Affordable Care Act subsidies for a few more years so that insurance prices on the exchange don't shoot up. That's going to cost $64 billion, and it really has nothing to do with climate change or expanding the social safety net. It's primarily just maintenance on Obamacare. And then there's $369 billion to invest in what's being called energy security and climate change. That's the meat of the bill. That's what's being held up as historic. More on that in just a second. But those who are decent at math probably realize something here doesn't add up. $739 billion raised in revenue, but the bill only includes $433 billion in new spending. Someone is walking around with $300 billion in their pocket. The Manchin deal will take all those savings, enough to eradicate homelessness, and devote it toward deficit reduction. Deficit reduction. That's why the agreement is called the Inflation Reduction Act and not something having to do with climate change. The bill stipulates that almost as much money being invested in climate change also has to be burned going towards deficit reduction. Completely meaningless exercise that will only satisfy debt fetishists and inflation hawks in Washington. The bill is over 700 pages long and was dropped last night, so the details of that $369 billion investment in energy security and climate change are still being discovered. But it's been a priority of Joe Manchin, who makes more money as a coal baron than as a U.S. senator, to ensure that any new investments in clean energy are paired with investments in dirty fossil fuel energy as well. It's what he's called an all-of-the-above approach. And here's what Manchin said in a statement announcing the deal. Quote, "As the superpower of the world, it is vital we not undermine our superpower status by removing dependable and affordable fossil fuel energy before new technologies are ready to reliably carry the load. This legislation ensures that the market will take the lead rather than aspirational political agendas or unrealistic goals in the energy transition that has been ongoing in our country." And so, alongside necessary subsidies and tax credits for clean energy generation, including more efficient home appliances and vehicles that will reduce emissions over time, there's also money to keep the fossil fuel industry plugging along by investing in bogus initiatives like clean coal. And one could argue that yes, the clean energy investments totaling hundreds of billions of dollars are a big deal, but in a country that has never really made such investments, in a crisis that requires far, far more, using language like historic will only ensure that future legislation to stave off global warming will be that much harder to pass. It's hard to get moderates back to the table after you just applauded them for doing something unprecedented and historic. All right, two last points I want to make. First, there is a poison pill to this deal that's coming down the pike at a later date. The reason why Manchin is signing on to this compromise is because Democrats, including House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, agreed to pass legislation that will make it easier to build dirty fossil fuel infrastructure across the country through deregulation. As the Washington Post reported, quote, the accord came in part because Schumer, Pelosi, and Biden also agreed to seek and pass new legislation easing the federal permitting rules for pipelines and other infrastructure in the coming months. So any claims of carbon reduction in the Manchin deal need to be balanced with the construction of new dirty energy infrastructure in the future. And second, this is as much of a climate change bill as it is a Joe Manchin rehabilitation bill. The man has been subjected to continuous protests for over a year, and in recent weeks, fellow Democrats began talking about stripping him of his chairmanship in the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. But overnight, Manchin has turned into a hero for the party. Because of how political reporters have come to fetishize negotiations and deal-making, what's actually in the bill is less important than the fact that an agreement was reached. Never mind the fact that the planet is dying and Democrats are committing $300 billion toward deficit reduction. The important thing is there's a deal. Negotiations worked. And so you get this from Politico, quote, Manchin said he understands that the legislation will divide Washington and potentially reshape his reputation. Instead of the man who obstructed Biden's agenda, Manchin is now the Democrat from deep red West Virginia who cut a major climate change deal 3 months before an election. Just like that, from corrupt coal baron to the man who saved the planet. I think I'm going to scrom it. Hey, thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of our new videos. Also, if you want to see Means Morning News in its complete form, not just the clips we post here, head on over to Means TV and get access to all our new episodes and our entire backlog, plus tons of other great movies and original TV shows.